are you?
Oh, thank you, Ilsa, for a very kind introduction. I'm doing very well. Yeah, thank you for having me on your show.
That's really nice. I'm gonna start immediately with the first question. I had a question myself. This is my first question that I'm gonna do, and then we're going on with the listeners. How do we know that what we hear or what we receive is channeling, or is it just our ego, our mind who's talking to us? How do we difference this?
So in my experience, the two are very different in the way they appear to us. So I give examples sometimes of an apple and an orange, right? They're two very different things, and you know what an apple is because of how it looks and how it smells and how it tastes. Right? You know an orange because of its qualities. Well, the same thing happens when we look at our own personal mind and when we look at the higher self mind. So the higher self sounds different. The voice will actually sound different than your usual voice that you hear inside your head when you have your own personal thoughts. It'll also communicate in different words. The higher self will not have the same type of personality as your own human mind does. It'll feel different energetically. It'll often feel very loving, very peaceful. It'll feel like it's caring for you. And sometimes, as you know, our personal thoughts might be angry or upset or judgmental or afraid or just flat, not having much energy expression. So the higher self always feels very caring, very kind, very loving, and very supportive. There's also a type of wisdom to the higher self's communication. Its words will carry this wisdom, this knowledge, because the purpose of the higher self is really to support us in our own path of awakening. And that's not just our own personal awakening in ourselves, like building a higher understanding about who we are. It's really an awakening in the fullness of our experience. So how we live in this world, how we create the experiences of our lives, and how we interact with each other. So there's a wisdom, there's a care, a loving kindness. We notice that it sounds different. And for some people who are sensitive to the non-physical energy, you may actually feel like this higher communication is coming down into your head from above your body. So the higher self's wisdom is related to higher chakras within us. And oftentimes when we have this higher self communication, it does feel like we're communicating down from above. For those of us who have maybe been aware of our ego mind or personality mind, you'll notice that you often feel the energy coming from your abdominal area. So most of our emotions and our emotional reactions and our human conditioning, it's really felt in these lower chakras. And then that energy rises up to our head, and that's when we hear that personality. So the higher self comes from above us because it's not really human conditioned from what our physical body has seen and heard and experienced in the world. The higher self's above our body, and then it comes into us and offers us this wisdom and guidance. And then the lower mind, I call it the lower mind because it's in these lower chakras, that then rises up and communicates into our brain this way. Often the higher self helps us to have the greatest experience in the future, and then the lower self, that ego mind, it keeps us repeating the past. So if we're listening to the lower mind, we'll find that we don't really grow much in an understanding. We have the same situations appear over and over and over again. Whereas if we listen to the higher self, we see that we are growing a lot and we're evolving our experiences and reaching our personal goals. So there's lots of different qualities that are different between the personal mind and the lower mind. I think some of the challenges that people have is they try to judge the information only. And if the information sounds spiritual, right, then it's the higher self. And if it sounds human or if it has problems in it or incorrect logic in it, right, then it's the lower mind. I think this human mind, this conscious mind, is heavily invested in logic and reason, and it likes to judge everything. It likes to know yes or no or right or wrong, and sometimes that gets in the way. So instead of thinking, is an apple good or is an apple bad, right? Is an orange good or is an orange bad? Which one's better, an apple or an orange, right? Instead of just judging it as yes, no, good, bad, right, or wrong, we can really come into a greater perceptual experience of the apple and the orange. Right? We can come into a greater perceptual experience of the higher self and the lower self and really understand what each's purpose is. in our own human evolution, we're not rejecting our past. Our past is actually the catalyst for our awakening and our growth. So we really need to embrace our past because it helps us understand who we are and how we got here, and also how we want to move forward in our lives. We don't just throw out the orange because it's an orange. No, we honor the orange. We honor our past just being what it is. We appreciate the past. We appreciate our human understanding. It's really that energy of appreciation that allows us to connect into ourselves with greater love. And that love from our conscious self into our body, into these chakras in our body where the lower self-intelligence is held, that really facilitates this human awakening experience. I often tell people that the higher self is like our future self. It's taking us to the greater future that we desire to have. And the lower self is like the past self. And we're essentially evolving from our past into that greater future. We're using our intuition and our higher guidance to transform our human lives. And in doing so, it evolves our human understanding. We feel happier, more blissful and peaceful emotions in our body. And we really become a more evolved human being. I think sometimes people separate too much, the higher self and the lower self, and think one or the other. I have to get rid of one, I have to seek the other, and often that causes more problems. If we realize all of my mind has higher mind, lower mind, and middle mind, like future, past, and present. If I understand that all of my intelligence has these parts, then I can really honor all the pieces and integrate them together to really have the most effective human experience.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I heard it already. When we ask, when we go into judgment and we ask and we look for the no, yes, this is good, this I mean, then we are talking out of the mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the difference between the higher self, guides, angels, and yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
this,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. So our higher self is similar in vibration to our guides or our angels, but it's a little different. So our spiritual guides and our angels usually exist in higher dimensions, and they exist in frequencies related to our own human chakras, but the chakras that are outside of our physical body. So there are certain major chakras. There's major chakras and minor chakras, and people count them in different ways. But there's certain major chakras along our nervous system, and they really relate to the vibrations of the human experience. And an angel or a guide or your higher self is vibrating at a level that's beyond the human experience. And that's why it has a different way of understanding reality. So these higher beings and these higher energies are very peaceful and very blissful, very loving, very caring. And they also have a different perspective that often carries wisdom. I consider angels some of the highest beings in creation because they're very, very loving. Their type of intelligence has a very strong universal quality integrated into it. So an angel will often be perceived as having less of an individual personality and more of a universal quality of intelligence. Whereas a guide, I experience more like a friend. And a guide has a personality that sometimes is very human-like. Now, some guides can even be animal types of consciousness. So the intelligence might be more simplistic, more basic than even a human personality. Some people's guides are more evolved, like ascended masters or ascended souls that have already graduated from the human experience of learning. So different people have different guides, and they'll have different levels of conscious understanding and creative energy, intelligence, and awareness. But the guides still, they feel closer to us. They feel more similar to us, where an angel feels a little more distant because it has such an elevated type of understanding that is really more like this mind of God type of understanding. And the energy of an angel is absolutely beautiful. The times I've interacted with an angelic consciousness, it just feels so blissful and so loving. It really feels like you just dissolve, like you just dissolve yourself into this beautiful energy and harmony. So it's really, really a beautiful experience. And in that energy, we often have very little questions or no questions at all because the energy itself is so satisfying that there's really nothing that we're looking for. There's no questions that need to be answered anymore. We're just held in this beautiful, nourishing, angelic energy. Okay,
Wow,
so
that's
yeah.
lovely. It's like you disintegrate, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
It-
Yeah, you just disintegrate into that beautiful angelic field. Yeah. Yeah, now the higher self's a little different. Okay, so the higher self is not like a separate being, right? When I go up and I communicate with non-physical beings, I'll actually perceive them outside of myself as if I would see a person in this physical world. Even an angelic being, I'll see it outside of myself, but because I'm in its dimension with it, I'm going to feel its energy inside of myself as my own emotion, essentially, as my own vibration. So in these non-physical dimensions, when we communicate with non-physical beings, we don't really have this barrier of separation that we feel so strongly in the human world. And the reason is we don't have this physical body that feels so dense, and it gives us this solid appearance of form and space. In the non-physical realm, we don't have a container like this. Instead, we're more like vibrations that just express, kind of like a light bulb expresses. So we don't have this boundary, and we don't feel this boundary around us energetically. So when I meet a guide, for example, I'm going to perceive how this guide feels in a very clear way. Now, some of you might be empathic, which means you can feel emotional energy very well while you're in the human world. Being empathic in the world is very similar to communicating with non-physical beings in the sense that we're really able to feel the other person's emotional energy very well. And we feel it as if it's our own, like it got into our own energy system. So in the non-physical, we're very open. We feel each other's energy very clearly. In the higher dimensions, even the quality of our minds merge together. So when I'm in this angelic field with these angels around me, I'm feeling like my own understanding is very angelic, right? And like I said, when you're in that energy, you really don't have questions because everything just feels beautiful and perfect and serene. It's like you're on the most perfect vacation and there's nothing else going on in your mind. You're just taking it all in. So even the quality of my mind becomes like that angelic intelligence when I'm in that place with them. Now, I'm going to describe the higher self now because the higher self's different. The higher self is a part of our own intelligence. And depending upon how fully we become the higher self, we can feel its angelic-like qualities. Or it might feel like it's very distant to us and it's just communicating to us and we feel very human-like. So the higher self is located along this central channel, and there are these other chakras, and the higher self is pretty far up there, but it comes down into us, and we may meet it in one of these different chakras. And it's kind of a loose illustration of it so your mind can paint a picture. So when we connect, if I'm only able to expand myself to a certain distance, then it feels like the higher self is still communicating into me. I feel it inside of this channel of me. When I see a guide, I see it outside of me. I see it in front of me. When I see an angel, I see it in front of me. When I see the higher self, it's not a person, it's not a being, it's not a face that I see or a body that I see. It's really a higher part of my knowing, and it appears inside of this central channel. The more I feel myself expanding in size and going upward, the closer I get to its level of wisdom and energy and awareness. So I start becoming the higher self or my own higher self as I expand myself into these higher states of energy. Another guide will never feel like it's inside of me in that same way. Right? If you're empathic, you feel the energy, but it's still coming from outside of you, into you, from the front usually. But with the higher self, it's like you're becoming it, and even if you can't quite reach that state, it still feels like it's moving inside of you in the central channel.
Okay, it's a bit coming out of your container, yeah?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah?
yeah,
Coming out,
definitely out of the human body.
separate yourself about your physical body, let's say.
Yeah, so we can stretch. So when I channel, for example, I'm aware of my physical body, but I'm less aware of it as I stretch greater in size.
Yes.
So when I'm channeling and I'm in a very deep channeling state, I might just feel my lips moving. but I might not feel the rest of my body. And I feel myself as this big expanded state. And whatever I'm talking about, I'm seeing and I'm feeling. It's as if I am that experience I'm channeling about. And the only thing keeping me talking in the body is the fact that I still feel my mouth moving. But I'm not controlling my mouth. I'm just up here being the experience, and the communication's just flowing through naturally.
Ah, okay. And the ETs, I wanted to ask you about. Is, are there guides, normal guides, the ETs?
Well, there's the term extraterrestrial often refers to anything without a physical human body. So there are ETs in lots of different dimensions. Sometimes what people consider ETs are actually beings that live in the physical universe, but they live a great distance away from our physical world, and they have technology that allows themselves to travel here. Right? So they have ships that use energy sources, or they understand the laws of physics in a different way that human beings do, and they're able to come here in their physical machines. Other ETs exist in maybe a dimension above the physical reality. So we can't see them with our eyes unless they adjust themselves to us. Right? So sometimes you may notice that, like, I saw an ET in my bedroom, right? But no one else saw it. Or I see a ship, in the sky, but no one else sees it. So we can adjust our senses to perceive one dimension or two dimensions above us, and then we see their existence. Or sometimes they connect with us because often we have a desire to interact with them, and they then come into our personal consciousness in a way that raises our vibration to see them. So there's lots of ETs at different levels of reality, different dimensions. I think sometimes in our human way of thinking, we divide everything so concretely. It's like, this is the third dimension Earth, and then there's another fourth dimension Earth and a fifth dimension. And it's like our logic cuts everything off and we separate it. But my experience that everything's really one flow. It's like you can count the waves in the ocean, but you can't really separate one wave from another wave. You can draw a theoretical line and say, okay, at the lowest point of the wave, we're going to divide it. And that's the first wave and the second wave. But in reality, the universe never divided the two waves. The water flows the same between all of them. And that's my experience with the dimensions, is that everything is flowing together and connected. And the more we realize that we are all one with everything, the more we can experience our own perception going into these different dimensions with these.
Okay, interesting. Do we all have guides with us? Do we all have angels with us, or just some people have just angels or guides and angels? What about that question?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is a free will universe, so we can have whatever we desire to have. Nearly every being here has guides. I always speak in a relative term. I don't try to speak in absolute and say, yes, everyone has it. But in my experience, just about everyone I've seen has guides. So it's a very regular, common experience because we are non-physical beings ultimately, and sometimes we need some help from other non-physical beings that understand us. It's real easy to get lost in our human experience, right? To get very consumed by just what's happening in the world and then lose awareness of why I'm here, how I'm supposed to grow and evolve as a soul. And our guides are always then working with us to help us stay in that state of remembrance. Usually at night when we dream, we interact with our guides, but not everybody remembers what their dreams are. But it happens almost every night for all of us. So we reconnect, we have these communications that help us to understand why I'm here in this world and what my goals are and how I can really evolve myself into this greater being of God realization. Angels are different. In my experience, angels don't act the same way guides do, because angels don't really serve that same purpose. Trying to think of an example in the physical. Not one comes to mind, but essentially a guide is kind of like a coach or a teacher,
Okay.
right? And you can go, you have access to that coach or teacher, you have access to that guide very easily, but an angel doesn't really act like a teacher or a guide. An angel serves a more universal purpose and a less personal purpose. You might go to the angelic realm for healing. You might go to the angelic realm for like a wisdom of oneness, like being held in an energy of oneness and understanding that. But a guide is more instructional. A guide is more conversational. So it's a different type of experience. If we want to be in the angelic energy and receive it, we can. We can ask for support. We can ask that the angels are present in our lives. So we can actually do this consciously, and it's a very good thing to do, right? But I think that guides aren't as personal to us angels aren't as personal to us as guides are, just by the relativity of who they are and how they function in this reality. But we all have them.
But we all have them.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the most important.
Yeah, we're not alone in this.
No, we're not alone in this. But it's a bit what you say. It's not separate. It's all one.
Yeah.
But more connected we are, it's a bit what you say when you go out of this physical container. More connected we are, more that what we do understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything's perfect. Not everybody can understand it. Not everybody feels the same thing.
Yeah.
Not everybody connects with their emotions in the same way.
Yeah.
It's very...
Yeah, it's difficult for a lot of people to understand the idea of oneness because they don't have a tangible experience to reference.
Yeah.
A lot of times we conceptualize something when we haven't really experienced it ourselves yet. And the conceptualization is the beginning of the process, right? Once you understand the possibility of something, then you can go seek it out and create that experience for yourself. So sometimes it's difficult to really conceptualize oneness when all I see around me with my physical senses are separation. Usually I tell people that if you look at the physical environment, you can still see evidence of oneness. Right? The light of the sun comes into you, and that allows you to see. Right? The light comes into all the objects and allows us to see. Essentially, the objects are bodies of light that are shining. So the world has to come into your body in order to know it exists. Sound has to come into your body. Breath has to come into your body. Food has to come into your body. Right? Everything in the outside world is creating my form. So even though they appear to be separate, there's a constant flow, a constant giving and receiving of everything creating each other. So even though there's physical appearance of space, distance, and different forms, there's still a creative unity that's here in the physical reality. If I go then deeper into the emotional reality, I see that I can feel the same thing another person's feeling. And we say you walked into a party, and you came from your own home feeling your own energy, and you drove to the party, and as soon as you go into the building of the party, you start to feel the emotion of the party. That energy comes into you. There's very little separation in the emotional universe. And being able to feel the energy of a group or connect with another person and feel the emotional energy is evidence of oneness. The more we go into subtle vibrations, so the more we go into these higher dimensions, the easier and greater the appearance of oneness is. And I'm going to stress the word appearance because the reality is there's always oneness. We just can perceive it more clearly as we go into these more subtle dimensions, these higher dimensional states. So I think sometimes it's just about wrapping our mind around how to find evidence for these spiritual concepts, because the oneness is here. And even material science shows us that there is oneness, that space is just the appearance of separation, but not an actual construct of separation. Nothing's actually separate at all.
Okay. Very good. What can you tell us about karma?
Yes, that's a very loaded word.
Very loaded word.
Yeah.
Word.
A lot of people define it different ways. When I was in college, I learned the translation of it means change. So I just interpret the original translations as there is change. Right? There's change happening. And then I can also expound upon it or expand that to say that what happens right now is going to be changing into the next moment and the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. So the experience of change creates the appearance of time. And the experience of change creates a type of solidity or unification throughout time. Now, in the human mind, we often think of karma as who I am or what I get, right? Do I have good karma? Do I have bad karma? And that's going to determine what I get out of life. I like to use words a little differently. I like to use words that we have already an understanding of that's very clearly defined. So sometimes I stray away from words like karma because it's interpreted so differently by so many people. So I'll say that we have an understanding, and the understanding often has with it emotional energy. And so some people say my understanding and my emotional feelings are my karma. And if I'm a good person with good karma, then I'll have a high understanding, a spiritual understanding, and I'll have a lot of happy energy. Right? So oftentimes karma is used to define how I feel and how I think. Some people use the word karma to define the events that happen to me in my life. And if I have good karma, then I have good things happening in my world. I have a good job, I have a good wife or good children or a good husband, or I have a fortunate experience. I can live in a certain place that I'm very happy to live in. So the word karma is defined very, very loosely, and I think sometimes that creates problems in communication. I prefer to use a word that is more common to our modern day vocabulary because then we can kind of narrow into specific things. Now, related to our experiences in our life and the changes that happen, I see that everything is constantly changing and we're not stuck by anything that's happened in the past. Right? This moment right now, if I know how to do it, I can change how I feel in my body. And a lot of people don't know how to work with their emotions like that, but we can learn. I teach it in my videos and in my courses. We can learn how to actually take our intelligence and our awareness into our body and change the emotional energy I feel. And this shows us that happiness is a choice, that I can choose to be happy, but I also have to know how to be happy, how to create happiness. And the way I've just described it, it's a process of you creating directly the emotional feeling in your body. Some people don't believe that's possible, but that's just because they don't have a similar type of experience that I do. And I've shown myself that that is possible. And I've helped others to see that it's possible, and now they know how to do it themselves. Often we're conditioned as young children to believe that the outside world determines how I feel inside my body. And I create happiness by getting a job, right? By having someone smile at me, by having someone compliment me. I look in the mirror and I judge my appearance as beautiful, then I feel happy. So we're often just using the outside world to try to create a feeling inside ourselves. And we believe the outside world determines how I feel. If I have a good job, I'm happy, a good car, a good husband, good wife, for so on. My experience is that it's not the outside world that really does any of it. It's our mind. If I like my job, I'm happy. If I don't like my job, I'm not happy. It can be the same job. One day I like it, the next day I hate it. Right? The job's not making me happy or unhappy. My mind's understanding is making me happy or unhappy. So we can take that fundamental idea that my mind controls my emotions, and then I can go deeper with it and learn how to use my mind to generate specific feelings of energy. So me in my own life, I don't feel bound by my past. Yes, changes happen, and I'm living a life based upon all the events that have happened to me. But my free will in choosing what I want to do next is not controlled by my past. Now, people might say, well, you need a job and you need income and you need a home. And I say, I have these things, but I'm actually free to walk out of my home and never come back. I'm free to quit my job and never get another job. I experience the consequences of my actions, right? I experience the effects of every creation I make, but I am free to do anything I want to do. So I'm not restricted by karma while I'm experiencing karma. I'm not restricted by the changes in my life while I experience change constantly happening.
Exactly. Yeah, but in general, the people just, they don't feel, they just feel limited because of
Yeah,
fear.
exactly.
Fear
Yeah.
is the basic. I want to quit that job. No, I'm not going to quit that job because I don't have money anymore. What I'm going to do, how I'm going to pay, how I'm going to, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a,
and sometimes that fear is a healthy fear. Sometimes we realize if I quit this job, I won't get money, I won't have food, I'll lose my house, and maybe my family, if I have one, would suffer. So that that fear is actually very helpful. Fear's not a bad thing, right? That fear is very helpful because it's a warning, don't do this, or you'll get an experience you don't want to have. We can look at fear and say, okay, what's behind this feeling of resistance? In my understanding and what I teach is that fear is an emotion of resistance. That's the communication of fear. Every emotion is communicating an understanding. And when we feel fear, we're feeling resistance to something. So why am I feeling resistance to quitting my job? I'm feeling resistant because I will suffer with less money and no home and no food for myself or my family. And my family will probably get upset with me. So that resistance is helpful. It's when we don't look at life and don't realize I'm free to make choices within life that we then suffer. I can say, I need money, I need food, I need a home, and so does my family. And I want my family to be happy with me. I want to have that emotional connection. So those are important to me. Now, how can I make money doing a job that I enjoy more? And then while we have that job that's giving us security, I can start educating myself to train for a new job. I can start creating my own business perhaps in my free time. I can do things that honor me taking my life to where I want it to go to by being realistic with my life, by looking at the fear, understanding while I'm afraid, and then honoring my free will to really change my life. Often in our human conditioning, we believe in so much restriction, and that's the bigger problem. We might think, well, I have a job and I can't be happy unless I quit it, and then I can get another job. I look at my own life, sometimes I've had 4 jobs at the same time, right? And each of them gave me something that I enjoyed, and some of them had qualities I didn't really enjoy. And over time, I changed to focus more on what I wanted. We don't have to have one job. We can have many jobs. We don't have to limit ourselves in thinking that it's only possible this one restricted way. It's like if we're trying to create a good future, a better future for ourselves, we don't have to focus on restrictive ideas. We can focus on creative ideas, and we can start going directly towards what we want to have and not believe in these ideas that hold us back. It's all about how we think in our realities because our lives respond to our mind's understanding.
Exactly. They always say we always looking outside for the answers, but it's all inside of us. You know?
Exactly. We create the answers. We create our lives. It's so important to recognize that we're the creators of our lives because that's what really makes us happy. The happiness is not in getting what we want. The happiness is in showing ourselves we're creators. Right? We feel happy because we witness, I created that. And there's a sense of happiness, of pride or reward in that creation. We celebrate ourselves as creators when we reach our goals. That's what makes us happy. It's the sense of accomplishment. So say you work really hard and you buy yourself a nice car or a nice home. The happiness is when you look at that car or that home and you feel good that you have it. Okay. Now, it's not the home giving you the emotion or the car giving you the emotion, because you could look at a home next to yours, the neighbor's home, and it looks exactly the same as yours, but you don't feel that same happiness when you look at it. You feel happiness looking at your home. Even though they're identical, it's your home you feel happy about because you created that experience. So we celebrate our creation. We're here to experience ourselves as creators. And in my experience, that's the greatest source of happiness that we have.
Yeah, that's very interesting because there we go. We enter just in this area where you really have to be thankful for everything what we have, because then being thankful, well, I mean, anyway, this works for me. Being so much thankful for all the things that I have, not concentrating on the things that I don't have, uh, it makes you happy.
Yes,
Just being
exactly.
thankful, it makes you happy. It gives you a happy feeling.
Yeah,
And it doesn't come
gratitude.
from outside. Yeah, gratitude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, gratitude is one of the most powerful emotions of happiness. It makes us feel connected to everything. So when you walk around your home and you look at all the things you have and you feel happy about them, you feel grateful for them, you feel connected to them, you feel this flow of loving energy and oneness towards the world you live in. Yeah, it's really a powerful practice.
Exactly. It's just so you make it, you create it yourself, just
Mm.
being thankful, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. How are you coping with the situation that we have now with the COVID-19?
To be honest, not much in my life has changed at all. And the only thing that really changed is I cannot go to the gym every day like I used to, because the gym's closed. But I still go to this grocery stores. I still get my food. It's rare that I would eat at restaurants, but I have had to put that to aside, because yeah, the restaurants are closed. But just now, this week, they're opening up in America. I really haven't experienced much change at all, to be honest. I have an understanding that doesn't really become afraid with what's happening in the world. I know that my human experiences are based upon my understanding and how I live my life and the energy I put into my life. So I have no fear about getting this type of illness. I have no fear about being close to other people who maybe may or may not have this illness. I don't wear a mask where I go. I don't wear gloves. I don't change my clothing at all. I'll wear sandals and shorts. I don't cover up. Uh, it does. So this experience
I do
doesn't
the
really
same.
affect me. Yeah, because of my understanding. I do see different behaviors in the world, and so I have compassion for a lot of people. I do feel the energy when I go out into the, like the social places of the world, like a food store, for example. I'll feel this restrictive energy of fear. I'll notice that some people are afraid of each other and they want to stay away from each other. They want to distance themselves. So I do notice this type of energy in my environment, but it doesn't affect the choices that I make. Um, I walk the wrong way in the lines of the grocery store. Some of the stores in America on the floor have wrote arrows that you're supposed to now go one way down this road and turn around. I just go where I need to go. I haven't gotten in trouble for it yet, and I don't think I will. But for me, I don't really want to change myself, but I don't want to rebel either. I don't have an energy of rebellion. For me, it's just letting whatever happens flow naturally from me. And for me, I don't align with those energies of fear. So my behavior doesn't comply with a lot of their requests. I'm not wearing masks. I'm not covering up my body. Yeah, so for me, it really hasn't affected me personally because I don't put a lot of importance on it. But I do have a lot of compassion for the people who maybe struggle with it more. I have a lot of compassion for people who've lost family members during this time. I know some people who have had family members or friends who've passed away at this time, and so I have a lot of compassion for that experience. It is a big experience in the world, but ultimately we have the power within our minds to determine how we think and how we feel, and ultimately how we want to create our lives.
Interesting, because here I am somebody who likes to go out every day a little while. And I thought I would have it really difficult to stay in my house because we
Hmm.
were really restricted. We in the Canary Islands, we were very restricted. I think one of the worst,
Mm.
Spain, where we couldn't go to the beach, we couldn't go
Hmm.
to the woods walking. We could just go with the dogs. If we had dogs, we could just walk 100 meters around the house, and we could go to the supermarket, and that was the only thing
Wow.
direct to the closest by supermarket, and that was it. We couldn't
Mm.
do anything else. If they saw us just walking somewhere where we shouldn't be, 600 euros.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
oh,
very
yeah.
restrictive.
They were very, very strict. And in fact, I really enjoyed it to be home. That was it.
I
I
think a
really
lot of
enjoyed
I
it.
think a lot of people have. Yeah.
It depends. It depends about one because there's so many things to do. You can, you can read, you can paint, you can
Mhm.
organize your house, you whatever. There's so many
Yeah.
things to do, and now that you have your channels and all the media and everything, there's
Hmm.
always things to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
We
always
make the most of our time.
the most of our time.
Hmm.
Okay. If we live in a dualistic universe, is the world peace even possible? Somebody
Mm.
asks.
Well, I have a lot of peace, and I
Yeah.
know other people do, because I feel the energy of peace is based on our understanding. Now, I walk around the world and I see that not everybody has peace within themselves.
Yeah.
Uh, and really, it's because of how we think about ourselves and about this world. I think the question of duality is like karma, or the term duality is like karma. It's a very difficult to define term, and people are using it very different. My experience is that there's the appearance of differences. I wouldn't even call it duality. I would say multiplicity. There's appearance of an infinite number of different forms, and consciousness is experiencing itself in an infinite number of different forms. In this reality, it's all still an experience of oneness. It's all happening within the one consciousness. It's all the one consciousness experiencing itself in everything. And like I mentioned to an earlier question, everything is really creating everything else. So there is no real separation of self or other or of duality. A lot of times people use the word duality, at least in my opinion, to connote good and bad or right and wrong or some type of dimension that's undesirable to be in. I think when a person defines the term that way, they're really defining or they're really using their mind in a way that's not really serving their highest good. Anytime you think about negative things or good and bad or right and wrong or undesirable things, you're going to cause suffering in yourself. My experience is that the line of good and bad is a line that we draw ourselves based upon our understanding. What I think is good for me, another person may not desire to experience. It's like, for example, what you said, right? You're now spending more time at your home because of the COVID experience, right? And that might be good for you. You're happy. You're able to be in your home, you're able to do your artwork and maybe meditate more or read a book. Someone else may say, that's a bad experience. I don't want to be in my home. It's the same experience. We draw the line of good or bad based upon how I'm creating in that present moment. For me, I don't even think about duality because I consider it just an abstract concept that is often loaded with uncomfortable emotions like fear, doubt, anger, resistance. I think it's unconstructive to form these ideas that make us feel more restricted. My experience is there is no separation. So in regards to peace, peace is really just a feeling of relaxation and a feeling of harmony. You can't relax when you feel disharmony from other people or from the world. Any form of resistance is not going to feel like peace. So how can we get our mind into a place that allows us to not judge the world as good or bad, to not create this idea of duality is wrong, because that removes our peace? How can I learn to be in the present moment in any way the universe is deciding to show itself to me with all these infinite number of forms, all these infinite dimensions? How can I be in this experience without resistance? Because then I'll feel relaxed, I'll feel comfortable, and I'll have peace. So peace is based upon how I interpret my reality in the present moment. It's not based upon, am I in a dimension of self and other? Am I in the first dimension or the 51st dimension? It's really not about that. It's about my interpretation of God, of my reality. Can I be relaxed and feel harmonious with the present moment? Or am I creating ideas that separate myself and others? Now, the question also is, can the world experience peace? And I think, yeah, it can. Anything is possible. The potential for peace is here for all of us. We are given every single emotional feeling within the human spectrum. We are given so many different ways to think and act and create. When we start using our mind in ways that create harmony, then we're going to feel an increase of peace. We can have peace in this world. There's no power outside of us forcing us to think a certain way or live a certain way. If we reject the rules of society, we'll have the consequences of those rules. But we have to remember that we created those rules in the first place. And we can also change those rules at any time. Everything in our reality is our own creation. And the more we embrace that, the more we can actually manifest the world that we want to live in. But when we believe that we're stuck here, there's powers forcing us to be someone we don't want to be, when we believe in these restrictive ideas, like oftentimes how duality is defined, we end up creating our own suffering. So the bigger problem is the ignorance of who we are as creators, and not, am I in a dimension in which there are different forms appearing?
Good. Somebody asked, what is that ear ringing?
Hmm.
I'm jumping a little bit from one in
Yeah.
another, no?
Yeah, I
But
saw that
is that
question on the
okay with
list.
you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
The ear ringing is going to be different for different people. Sometimes people are hearing the sound of electrical devices, and that also includes the cellular signals that travel through the air. So the cellular signals are a vibration of electricity, and it comes out of the phones, it comes out of the antennas, and sometimes we're hearing that sound when we're in our normal environment. And you would notice if you're actually hearing that sound or not if you would go to a location in which there are no cellular phones active and no antennas. So sometimes we are hearing that vibration. Other times it's a person's own health condition. Sometimes the muscles in our neck and oftentimes in the upper part of our shoulders, upper back, are really tight. And then the muscles put pressure on the nerves that are moving from the ear into the skull. Sometimes there's an imbalance in the fluid inside the ears, and so the ears are not properly draining themselves and they're accumulating toxins. And so there might be small crystals of minerals, for example, inside these passages of hearing. And because they're crystalline, they hold vibration. It's like the battery of a quartz crystal. Sorry, like in a watch, there's a battery and there's a quartz crystal, and the quartz crystal receives the electricity from the battery, and the crystal vibrates. So if you have crystalline structures, like silicon-based structures or mineral structures in your ears,
Yeah.
they could be receiving the electricity that travels through the nerves, and they'll be holding a vibration, and then you hear a constant humming. So sometimes it's pressure on the nerves, sometimes it's actually some things growing or not being released in those channels in your ears, those small tubes. Other times you are actually hearing electricity because of all the electrical devices we have. And then there's another aspect which does happen as well. So as we awaken and as we become more aware of non-physical energies, we can hear sounds of our chakras. And if you're interested, you could look this up and find what sounds relate to what chakras. But sometimes there's the ringing of bells. Sometimes there's the sounds like the buzzing of bees. So there's different sounds that you can hear, usually only during meditation when you're going deeper into these chakras. So what most people do experience in the physical hearing is something in their physical body, or like I said, in the atmosphere because of all the electrical devices we have.
Yeah, because they say sometimes it's the eye, it's the phone, sometimes it's the chakras.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between the left and the right one?
In terms of the energy channels, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Is
Yeah,
there a different message if you hear a beep?
well, in my mind, the message should be understandable for it to be a message. So usually for me, the ringing in the ears, although I don't hear it personally, but the ringing in the ears would be not really a form of communication because the message would be not be able to be received. It would be an ineffective way for any higher dimensional being to communicate. Right? So in my experience, whenever I've communicated with any beings, it will be felt as emotion, maybe heard as sound, right? Like an actual communication stream, like words. It might be seen as symbols, or it might be known. Maybe there's a silent part of us that knows what it is they're communicating because our deeper minds are connected. So for me, when it's non-physical communication, the message is actually effectively delivered. Sometimes people don't understand their health problems. Sometimes people haven't yet investigated their experiences well enough, and they just automatically assume it's something related to spirituality. And I think that that assumption can be dangerous, just like any assumption can be dangerous. There have been experiences where human beings have had, spiritual things happen, and it turned out it actually was a physical health challenge. Sometimes people think they have a physical health challenge and it is actually spiritual energy, right? So we really have to investigate more to try to understand what's happening rather than just assume it's something without having the evidence to support it. You asked about the right and left side. Yeah, they are different in their function. So the right side of our body has more solar energy, it's often been called, or masculine energy or fire energy. The left side has more lunar energy, like the moon, which is also called more of like a mental or an emotional energy or a water energy. And so we notice that both the sides of our body have these different feelings. The right feels more excited and like it's rising up, like fire. The left feels calm, cool, and relaxing, often like it's flowing downward, like water. There are different breathing practices, for example, in pranayama, in which you can change the flow of the energy as well. You can work with it and bring them in harmony together. But we'll still notice that the right side is always more fiery, the left side's always more watery. Some people might say, well, your father's karma is in your right side and your mother's karma is in your left side. I don't think it's that exact, although I do see that oftentimes that's the case. The reason why I say I don't think it's that exact, but it's the case, is because usually our father demonstrates more of these fiery qualities, and our mother demonstrates more of these watery qualities. And we got the examples of how to think and feel from our parents. But if we had a mother who was very fiery, we would notice that her conditioning, her karma, as some people call it, her psychological conditioning is imprinted in the right side of my body. Even though it's my mother, it has a fiery quality because she was a very fiery person and she influenced my self-esteem or my confidence, something fiery. And I feel her influence on the right side of my body.
Is the spiritual heart the same energy described as feminine, Shakti, or Yin?
No, no, it's very different.
That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
question.
Yeah. So oftentimes people think the spiritual heart is more like an emotion. It has a feeling-based energy, but it's not the same as emotion. So the spiritual heart is the deepest energy center in our mental body. It's where we access our wisdom. It's where we experience the original creative energy of our soul. And that energy feels like it's very balanced, male and female, because that energy has a oneness aspect to it. When that energy then comes into an expression through the mind, then it takes on qualities of male and female based upon the mind's understanding. If you're meditating deeply and you have a silent mind and your emotional energy has already stopped, it's stilled to a place of silence, and you start to feel your spiritual heart awaken, the spiritual heart will feel very powerful, like masculine, but also very soft and loving, like feminine. It'll have both qualities at the same time. Okay? You feel it as this creative energy that wants to come into life. It feels like you wanting to express yourself in your life. So it's a very deep energy within us. Sometimes what people think is the spiritual heart, but really isn't, is the heart chakra's energy. And the heart chakra is more feminine. So when I look at the chakra system, I see that the first chakra at the bottom, the root chakra, it's very masculine, right? It has these fiery qualities. It has qualities that usually a man demonstrates more of. The second chakra in the sacral area is more feminine, and usually women demonstrate this quality more fully than men do. The third chakra is masculine, the solar plexus. The heart chakra is feminine. So we have this ordering from the bottom up, male, female, male, female. The throat chakra then is more masculine, the third eye is more feminine, and the crown chakra is a balance of both. So sometimes what people think is the spiritual heart is more like the emotional qualities of their heart chakra. Like compassion is a heart chakra quality, right? That care, that love, that embrace, that's a very feminine quality, and that's a heart chakra quality. The spiritual heart is an original energy, and it has qualities of that love and that care, but it's different. It feels very different. It feels balanced within itself, whereas the chakra systems are more individual locations of different emotional qualities.
Wow,
Mhm.
very interesting. I think that will be enough for the first one. Do you have any message or any reflection for the listeners?
Yeah, I
Something
do.
you
Yeah.
would like to?
I just like to encourage everybody to develop a more sacred relationship with themselves. So be kind to yourself, be caring to yourself, and also learn to trust yourself more. So much of my own journey of awakening has really been about myself discovering myself. right? Learning about what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, learning about how I'm a creative part of my life experiences. So when we develop a healthy relationship with ourselves that is kind, caring, compassionate, also inspires confidence and trust, we'd really notice that our life transforms in a great way. And the reason is that our soul now has a desire to embrace our human self. So anything that we want to feel close to, or anything that we admire, like you gave the example earlier, anything that you have gratitude for, appreciation for, it actually creates an increase of your soul's energy flowing into that thing. So when you're kind to yourself and loving to yourself, when you're trying to trust yourself more and express yourself more, you're actually opening up that spiritual heart energy center, and more of your soul's creative energy is coming into you. If we focus too much on the outside world and other people's opinions, then the energy flow goes to them. And we notice we keep thinking about the world or other people. We keep staying in their energy. When we start to evolve our own understanding, or really even just discover our own understanding, then our creative energy flows into ourselves, and we evolve ourselves more quickly. There's a beautiful quote that's from this man named Warren Buffett. I think the quote is really amazing. So this man has been one of the most successful businessmen in the world, most successful investors in the world. And he says that the most important thing to invest in, because everybody's asking him, right, what should I invest in? He says the most important thing to invest in is yourself. And I think that's a really beautiful piece of wisdom from this man. I think that we should really honor ourselves and love ourselves and try to establish the best relationship we can with ourselves. And at the same time, try to discover more of who you are and how you work. And then you'll be able to experience a life that you're really happy with.
Thank you so much, Lincoln. This
Yeah,
is
you're very
really
welcome, Itza. Thank you for having me on your show. It's been a really wonderful experience.